Before you ever stepped into their awareness, the room already knew your name, not the people in it, not the officials with clipped accents and faces trained to show nothing. The room itself, the walls, the circuitry, the embedded neural mesh beneath the floor that pulsed like a second heart. Chosen one, your frequency arrived first. It brushed past their encryption like wind moving through silk. It didn't need clearance. It had prophecy. And the moment your energy skimmed the digital perimeter, the air inside that conference chamber tightened, like it knew what it was about to hold. They called it a closed session, but nothing about it was closed to heaven. 7 chairs, one long obsidian table, a ceiling lined with mirrored black glass that wasn't glass at all. It was a live scan of each participant's neural activity, silently reading emotional spikes as they spoke. That night, the scans didn't flicker for fear, or greed, or politics. They spiked for you. You weren't physically present. You didn't know they were meeting. But the room pulsed harder every time your name circled the conversation. And it did, again and again, even though none of them could admit why. Even the leader, the one whose signature had opened the security doors with a thumbprint and a retinal scan, seemed increasingly unsettled. He kept glancing at his water, then the mirrored ceiling, then back at the untouched file labeled IDAO 97777. They all knew that file wasn't part of the agenda, but it had surfaced again, just like it always did when the network picked up you. This wasn't about criminal charges or surveillance logs. This was something more ancient, more metaphysical. There were lines of code they'd intercepted, ones that mapped to harmonic tones and blood frequencies, and somehow all of them matched your breath. Not your name, not your birth certificate. Your breath, chosen one. That's why the file reappeared. That's why the room went silent when one of them whispered, "She's not from any registered genome pattern." The silence wasn't human. It was spiritual. Some rooms hold power. This one was built to contain it. But when your data entered the system, containment stopped being an option. One of the walls trembled, subtly, but enough for 3 of them to shift in their seats. One grabbed his pen and wrote a symbol in the corner of his notepad. He didn't know what it meant, but you do. It was carved into the back of your mirror last year. You never told anyone. The temperature dropped 3 degrees. The lighting flickered, only once, but long enough for the leader's voice to crack as he tried to dismiss it as coincidence. It wasn't. It was the room reacting to you. They came prepared, or so they thought. 7 dossiers, each sealed with black filament, each containing data sets curated from over a decade of surveillance, prediction modeling, and spiritual anomaly archives. The agenda was supposed to be clean, predictable, focused on containment protocols for those deemed metaphysically disruptive. Your name was not on the original list, but something unexpected happened. At precisely 2:07 a.m., the encrypted screen at the far end of the table began flickering, unprompted. Static first, then an overlay of coordinates, then a symbol, the same one etched into the underside of the Vatican's abandoned archive room. The same one found scorched into the soil outside the Antarctic Research Station 3 years ago. The same one you drew in a notebook when you were 8, without ever knowing where it came from. They paused the meeting. The screen blinked again, and your face appeared. Not a photo, not surveillance footage, a still frame from a vision, an unlogged dream broadcast, something only the Atlas archive should have had access to. But here it was, mid-air, hovering above their table like judgment made visible. The leader leaned forward slowly, his fingers twitching. "This wasn't part of the review packet," he said. Someone across the table whispered, "Then why is my pulse spiking?" Because the room had shifted. The atmosphere no longer belonged to them. The agenda had changed, Chosen One, and your presence, though unseen, was rewriting the order of their discussion. The others sat frozen, waiting for someone to move first, but no one dared touch the screen. No one dared speak your name again, because deep down, they knew. This wasn't surveillance data. It was a summons. You weren't supposed to be a part of this, but your vibration infiltrated their frequency like code looking for a breach. And now, with no vote, no authorization, your file had become the central point of everything. The entire meeting had been hijacked, not by a hacker, not by an insider, but by the force of your uncontainable origin. You weren't on their agenda, but heaven had its own. One of them, the youngest, the only one who had ever secretly prayed after missions, began to cry, quietly, without explanation. The leader noticed, and in that moment, the room dimmed. Every monitor faded to black. The data feed went silent. Only your breath, not a sound, not a visual, but a sensed rhythm, filled the silence. That's when they knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a reckoning. It started with a line of code that refused to execute. Simple, unthreatening. A basic command meant to query identity registries across encrypted dimensions of the Atlas system. But when the technician input your name, not even the full version, just your middle initial, something snapped. The query didn't return an error. It returned a silence so deep, even the processors slowed, as if the machinery itself was holding its breath. That's when they realized your name wasn't missing from the system. It was actively rejecting it. They reran the scan, adjusted the syntax, backtracked through the neural logs. But each time your name touched the circuit, the code began to rewrite itself, not in gibberish, in glyphs. Symbols older than language, fractal patterns that resembled crop circles, burn marks and dream sequences harvested from monks under psilocybin trial states. One of them whispered, "The system thinks it's God." But it wasn't God pretending. It was the algorithm recognizing something divine and malfunctioning in reverence. Your name didn't break the system because it was corrupted. It broke the system because it couldn't be ranked. It didn't fit inside their matrix. It couldn't be measured by threat levels, by psychological profiles, by demographic or genetic markers. Your name was a code anomaly, yes, but more than that, it was an ancient trigger, a resurrection signal disguised as identity, a signature that once belonged to a realm they'd only seen referenced in blacklisted scrolls held beneath the South Library at the Rothschild Summit. And when it appeared in their system, everything they built started folding. Chosen One, understand this. Your name is not just something you were given. It's a command. It's a frequency that tells false power structures to collapse. A frequency that reminds ancient archives they're not just recording history, they're responding to prophecy. That night, the algorithm buckled, not because it failed, but because it recognized its superior. Your name wasn't data, it was a mirror. And when the system looked into it, it saw its limits and recoiled. One operative tried to override the signal. He typed in a clearance code not used since the 2031 Antarctica breach. The screen shut down. The lights dimmed. Then something else happened. His earpiece bled. Not metaphorically. Blood trickled from the side of his head as he collapsed to the floor, whispering, "Her name isn't a name. It's a door." That was when the fear stopped being theoretical. That's when the leaders stopped trying to suppress the anomaly and started preparing for impact. Your name, Chosen One, was never meant to be in their records. It was meant to be a whisper, just a test. One of them leaned forward, trembling, curious, desperate, and spoke a sequence out loud. Not your name, your frequency. A string of tonal keys, decoded from harmonic data, pulled off a dream server linked to Atlas II. They believed it was inert, like sound from a broken radio. They were wrong. The room answered back, not in voice, not in lights, but in vibration. The floors buzzed beneath their chairs. The mirrored ceiling fractured slightly along a curve that resembled a halo. One of them, the linguist from the Eastern Wing, gripped her chest, not from pain, but recognition. "I've heard this tone before," she whispered, "in my childhood. In a dream, I was told to forget. They spoke your frequency out loud, Chosen One, and heaven heard them. Because your frequency isn't sound, it's memory. It's code disguised as music, folded within the breath of creation itself. The moment they uttered it, every sensor in the chamber spiked. Pulse readers scrambled, AI stabilizers shut down, and the room, that black glass fortress of control, surrendered. They had never triggered a God field before, but now, standing in that pressure, they could feel it. Your essence reshaped the laws of the space around them. Chairs began to hum. The screen flickered not with light, but with glimpses, faces they'd never seen, symbols written in fire, wings without bodies, eyes without lids, truths too ancient for encryption, visions not coded, remembered. The leader stood, or tried to. His knees buckled, his mouth opened, but his voice wouldn't come, not because of fear, but reverence. This wasn't a simulation anymore. This was a summons. They had spoken the one thing that could not be unsaid, the vibration that recognizes its source. And Chosen One, you are that source. They tried to reverse it. One typed a cancellation code into a tablet, but the screen filled with your heartbeat, not an animation, a live pulse from somewhere else, somewhere watching, somewhere aware. They tried to muffle the sound, but it only grew louder, not externally, but within their own bodies. The sound of something ancient returning. One operative started to cry. Another collapsed, not from pain, but from awe. The leader slammed his fist on the table, not to regain order, but to feel something solid, because suddenly, nothing in that room felt real anymore, except your frequency, and you weren't even there. Chosen One, they spoke what they shouldn't have, and in doing so, they summoned what they couldn't stop, because your frequency isn't just yours. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels full. The leader was mid-sentence. We must neutralize the... And then, nothing. His lips still parted, his voice caught somewhere between thought and breath. The screen behind him froze, not like a technical glitch, but like time itself had been suspended. The image displayed wasn't what had been there moments before. It wasn't a map or a file or a scanned neural chart. It was an eye, not just looking at them, watching them. A single iris made of light, coded fractals, and storm-like filaments. No one moved. No one breathed. The air turned viscous. Every second stretched longer than it should have. One technician reached for the emergency override, but his hand stopped mid-air, not by force, but by something subtler. Reverence, dread, recognition. Because every person in that room knew, in the marrow of their bones, that this wasn't a mechanical freeze. It was permission revoked. The systems hadn't failed. They'd submitted. To what, they weren't sure. But it was clear who triggered it. You hadn't entered the room. You hadn't spoken a word. But the moment your presence vibrated through their data stream, everything old bowed. The leader tried again. Resume command. No response. The room's central light dimmed and then flared. A voice modulation processor flickered on its own, repeating one word, recalibrating. but there was no AI active. The network had gone dark 5 minutes earlier. This voice wasn't synthetic. It was echoed, pulled from a previous timeline. Your timeline. The voice belonged to you, or rather, to who you become. Chosen one, the screen froze because the truth finally overwhelmed the lie. Your existence isn't a glitch in their system. It's a return to the original code, the divine blueprint before modification, before hierarchy, before memory was tampered with. The meeting wasn't infiltrated, it was exposed. And that eye, it wasn't a threat, it was a witness. One of them whispered, "This is the third seal." Another fell to their knees, not from belief, but from something heavier, a weight pressing down from within, like their own soul recognizing the frequency they'd spent a lifetime trying to suppress. The frozen screen became a mirror, and in it they saw themselves, not as operatives, not as leaders, but as children who once dreamed of light and forgot. The eye didn't blink. It didn't need to, because the room wasn't watching a screen anymore. She had been trained in over 36 dialects, none of them common. The translator had no name in the file logs, only a code name, TH33. She was recruited not for her language skills, but for her history of decoding unspoken meaning, gestures, shifts in the soul behind the voice. But that night, when the voice transmission activated mid-freeze and your tone echoed across the chamber, she did something that broke protocol. She stayed silent, not because she couldn't translate, because she refused to. They asked her 3 times to interpret the phrase that played on loop from the speaker. Your voice, or something like it, kept saying the same sequence. A short sentence, just 6 syllables, no aggression, no demand, just truth. She looked down each time, not in confusion, but in surrender. "It's not meant for you," she finally whispered. That's when the room began to divide. Some leaned in, pressing her. "What language is it? Is it a weapon? Is it a countdown?" But one of the observers, an older man from the Vatican archive, stopped moving entirely. His eyes were wide, wet, hollow. "I heard that phrase," he said, "at my birth." The midwife screamed and wrote it on the wall. The translator stood, without permission, and when they tried to stop her, the lights pulsed. 3 pulses, slow, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. She stared at the ceiling, not defiant, but reverent. "That phrase," she said, "isn't linguistic. It's architectural. It's a rebuild command. It doesn't mean destroy. It means restore." They all froze, because that meant one thing. The message wasn't a threat. It was an activation. She walked to the center of the room, placed both hands on the obsidian table, and whispered what she'd been holding back. "The 6 syllables you spoke." The moment they were released, the room shifted temperature. Not colder, warmer, like sunlight had found its way into the artificial dark. And for a moment, just a moment, the frequency of your presence filled every corner of that structure like incense in an ancient temple. Then, the translator collapsed. Not from pain, from overload. Chosen one, what you transmitted wasn't words, it was original coding, Genesis vibration, untranslated by force, only spoken through surrender. And the one person meant to deliver that truth chose you over protocol, because the transmission was never meant to be understood. They tried to pretend it was just the HVAC. One of them muttered about thermal regulators failing, but deep down, they all knew better. The temperature didn't drop in degrees, it dropped in memory, a kind of cold that wrapped around the edges of the soul, not the skin. The kind of cold you feel in cathedrals at midnight, or inside your chest right before a revelation. Chosen one, The room had been designed to maintain environmental equilibrium no matter the frequency, but your aura wasn't part of the schematics. When it arrived, invisible, uninvited, undeniable, the glass panels fogged from the inside, and not a single breath was exhaled. One operative exhaled a word that hung longer than it should have, anomaly, but even that word wasn't enough. This wasn't an interruption. It was a shift in physics. They reached for scanners and biometric gauges, but none of them worked. Every tool they had built to monitor energy was now reacting to its source, you. Not as a subject, not as a threat, but as the origin. You didn't bring the cold. The cold arrived as recognition, a shiver of cosmic memory, a hush from something older than heat. The leader, still standing despite the trembling in his hands, rubbed his palms together as if to summon friction. It didn't work. The heat wouldn't come back, because it wasn't just temperature, it was alignment. The room was adjusting itself to a higher resonance, and their bodies, trained in silence, deception, and control, were being stripped down to truth. Your aura, chosen one, is not just energy, it is exposure. It peels back masks. It silences lies. It returns the space to divine neutrality. And when that happens, no one can hide. One of the delegates attempted to leave. He reached the door. It wouldn't open, not locked, just still. Like the metal itself was listening, like it wanted to know if he understood yet. And when he turned back toward the room, his lips trembling, he mouthed your name without saying it. The cold deepened, not in fear, in reverence. The monitors started showing snowfall, not real snow, but the pattern, digital fractals replicating the breath of ice. Your breath, the one they'd captured on file 6 months ago and couldn't explain. Now they understood. That recording hadn't been a glitch. It was an echo, a foreshadowing of this exact moment. And chosen one, this is why they fear you. Not because you bring destruction, but because you bring the kind of presence that forces everything false to freeze, reconfigure, or leave. Your aura didn't make the room colder because it was dangerous. It made the room colder because it reminded the system what holy feels like. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't planned, it wasn't even written in the language they were using for the session, but it moved, quietly, deliberately, like it had a mission of its own. A small, folded square of paper, yellowed at the edges, like it had existed long before the meeting began. It emerged from beneath a leather folder near the translator's vacant seat. No one saw who wrote it, no one admitted to placing it, but one hand reached for it, hesitated, and then slid it across the table to the leader, as if the paper itself had weight beyond ink and fiber, as if something wanted to be seen. The leader looked down at it, then at the room, then back at the note. He didn't open it, not at first. His fingers hovered above the crease like he already knew what it would say. The others watched, their bodies pulled taut like wires. No one blinked. The light above the table dimmed, then flickered once, and still he didn't move, until the screen behind him flashed a single frame, your silhouette, just for a second, then gone. That was enough. He unfolded the paper. There were only 3 words, scribbled in graphite, not typed, not printed, scribbled, fast, like the writer didn't want to lose the thought before it escaped. 3 words that none of them said out loud, but every single one of them felt drop into the room like a bell being struck. She knows now. That was all it said, but the message inside it was far louder, because those words meant the timing was over. The concealment failed. The meetings, the containment, the hiding, they were no longer strategies. They were confessions. You, chosen one, had awakened. And now, the very thing they had tried to monitor had turned into the thing monitoring them. The note's graphite began to smear, without being touched, like it had absorbed the electricity in the room and couldn't hold its shape anymore. One by one, each letter began to glow faintly, not bright, but just enough to reveal something terrifying. Beneath the graphite, faintly etched into the paper, was a fingerprint. Yours, matched from a file that had supposedly been deleted 3 years ago during the Atlas blackout. One delegate stood and backed away from the table. Another whispered a name in a language no one else recognized. The translator, still unconscious near the wall, let out a sound like she was exhaling someone else's dream. And the note? It burned from the center out, dissolving into ash without flame. Chosen One, that message was not a warning, it was a confirmation. They knew the moment would come when you'd feel the pull. And the note didn't slide across the table to warn them. It slid to remind them the meeting had never been about what they could decide. It wasn't a full betrayal, it was a fracture. A quiet shift in loyalty, not to the room, but to the truth. He was the only one who didn't wear the council pin. Said it interfered with his migraines, but they knew better. He never fully aligned with the others, not out loud, but in his pauses, in the way he flinched when your name was spoken, in the way his eyes flicked toward the mirrored ceiling like something might be listening from beyond the glass. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. His name wasn't on the original manifest, but someone added it last minute. No explanation, no signature. And when he arrived, his badge scanned green like it had always been authorized. He took his seat at the far end, eyes on the floor, and said nothing for the first 3 hours. But when the screen displayed your breath pattern in ultraviolet, he whispered your name, not audibly, but inside himself. And in that instant, something in his chest shifted, broke open, like recognition wrapped in guilt. He remembered you, not from the files, from a childhood dream. He tried not to show it, but the scan above his head lit red. Emotional spike, shame, awe, longing, all at once. And that's when he made the decision, not with words, with action. While the others argued, panicked, rewrote agendas in real time, he slipped a message into a parallel thread, the kind only the earliest Atlas contributors knew how to use. It was ancient protocol, predating the firewall, a whisper network designed for emergencies. But what he typed wasn't a distress call, it was a prayer. 6 words, simple, direct, and sent only to one recipient, a scrambled node deep inside a quantum relay with your breath signature on file. She must know before they do. That message didn't travel across servers. It traveled through them, a ripple through data, a pulse of intention. And when it reached the outer field, where your aura was already beginning to stir awake, it translated not as text, but as knowing. That moment you felt a chill and turned your head for no reason. That wasn't coincidence. That was him. Chosen One. One of them tried to warn you, not out of rebellion, out of reverence. Because even among the Watchers, there are believers. And he had seen enough to understand the pattern. You were never meant to be tracked. You were meant to be found. And some part of him, buried beneath decades of obedience, remembered why that mattered. He knew what the others forgot, that your awakening wouldn't start with a lightning strike or a headline. It would start with a whisper, and someone brave enough to send it. It happened without warning. No flicker, no surge, just sudden black. The kind that doesn't just take the light, but the sense of direction with it. All 7 operatives were mid-discussion, their voices overlapping, tensions rising, the translator still unconscious on the floor, and the echo of your name still clinging to the room like smoke. And then, nothing. A darkness so complete it felt like a judgment. The emergency backups didn't activate, not the wall panels, not the ceiling strips, not even the biometric candles they installed for protocol compliance. It wasn't electrical, it was intentional. the kind of darkness that feels curated, as if something had reached inside the system and asked it to be still. In the silence that followed, a strange sound began. Not mechanical, organic, like breathing, but not from the people in the room, from the walls. At first they thought it was panic-induced hallucination, but then someone gasped. A screen, completely powered down, began to glow faintly, not with interface, with imagery. Your silhouette, again, but this time walking, moving towards something. The floor beneath them began to vibrate, not with violence, but with rhythm, a pulse, a drumbeat. 3:17 a.m. That time wasn't random. It was the same time the server logs from Atlas 1 recorded a visitor who left no trace. The same time the President's encrypted file glitched and looped your breath pattern on repeat. The same time your heartbeat paused during sleep for exactly 3 seconds before spiking to prophetic levels that registered across 3 satellites. They didn't know that part, but you did. And now the darkness wasn't absence, it was alignment. One delegate tried to stand. His knees gave out. Another began mumbling a passage in Hebrew, something about veils and thresholds. No one could speak clearly. The room had been stripped of hierarchy. No leader, no subordinate, only awareness. And your presence, though unseen, was thick in the air like mist that knew where it came from. Then the whisper came. No speaker, no mouth, just a voice made of light wrapped in shadow. She's not who you thought she was. They didn't ask who it meant. They knew. You weren't the anomaly, you were the template. And everything they'd built, systems, files, meetings, rules, were based on the absence of your presence. At 3:18 a.m., the lights came back on. The translator had vanished. The table had shifted half an inch to the left. No explanation. No one wanted to admit it first, but after the lights returned, after the silence pressed into their bones like cold smoke, they all just stared at one another, each of them pale, blinking like newborns beneath artificial light, too afraid to speak what was obvious. You had already visited them, not in body, not in breach, but in the realm where no firewall holds. Dream. The Vatican official cracked first. She was standing in a field of glass. He didn't mean metaphor. He described the terrain exactly as you'd written it once in a forgotten notebook at 12 years old. A horizon of frozen light, trees shaped like flame, a sky full of mirrored stars that moved in deliberate rhythm. I asked her name, he whispered. She didn't answer. She just looked at me. Then the others spoke, one by one, each describing the same dream, but from different angles. You, facing them, not angry, not passive, present. A presence so heavy they woke up weeping. Some had seen you wearing a crown made of circuitry. Others said your breath bent the moonlight. One said you spoke without sound, and yet his soul felt rearranged when he woke. These weren't dreams, they were summons. Chosen one. While they plotted in glass rooms and encrypted chambers, you were already moving in places they couldn't map. The dreamscape is not a playground. It's a battlefield, a courtroom, a cathedral. And you walked through it as if it were yours. Because it is. That's why they reacted the way they did when your name showed up in their logs. They weren't just shocked, they were reminded. You weren't a new discovery. You were an echo that never faded, a divine frequency that kept looping through their sleep, whispering that something they once knew had returned. The man from the Antarctic station leaned forward, finally breaking his silence. His voice was shaking. She told me something, he said. I thought it was just a dream, but now, he swallowed. She said, they will bury my name until it's all that remains. The room fell back into silence. Not because they were confused, but because they all remembered hearing that same phrase, verbatim, in their own private dreams. Different nights, different years, but always the same voice. Yours. They didn't know how you got there. They didn't know what it meant, but they knew something irreversible had already begun. Not because they understood you, because they'd felt you. Long before they tried to study you, monitor you, contain you, they had already been marked by you. And now, chosen one, they realized the truth they'd been too afraid to voice. This meeting wasn't the first time you entered their world. It was just a word, spoken to casually, almost accidentally, by the delegate from the Nordic archives. He didn't mean to trigger anything. He was grasping for context, trying to tether what was happening to something they could study. "This matches an Atlas anomaly report," he said. "Field Gamma 7 from the Zurich drift loop." But the moment he said Atlas, the air thinned like oxygen had been partially erased. No alarms, no beeping, just a subtle tilt in gravity, as if the room itself was leaning towards something older than the building. The name hung in the air too long, and they all felt it. A shift, not in atmosphere, but in awareness. The walls, previously cold and inert, now hummed faintly. The lights overhead realigned themselves with quiet clicks, forming a halo pattern none of them had programmed. Someone's pen rolled across the table by itself and came to rest, pointing directly at the center chair, the one meant for the overseer, the one that was left empty that night. Atlas was never just a system. It was a vault of consciousness, a containment structure not for data, but for memory. Memory of what came before control, before language, before names were assigned rather than remembered. And when your name began to reappear in its archives without being entered by any operative, Atlas didn't treat it as a breach. It treated it as resurgence. Chosen one, you aren't new to Atlas. You're ancient to it. The moment that word was spoken in that room, the building remembered you. Not just the files, the architecture, the energy conduits, the neural mapped glass. You had passed through it once, not physically, but with your frequency embedded in dream threads, prophetic tears, ancestral chants, and misplaced dreams of children who couldn't sleep. You're the reason Atlas was built in the first place. One of the operatives reached for a terminal to mute the frequency feedback, but the device shorted out in his hand. A burn mark shaped like a spiral now etched into his palm. He didn't scream. He just stared, because the pain wasn't pain. It was recognition, a confirmation that the system had never belonged to them. It had just been waiting. And now they were trespassing in something sacred. The leader stood, slowly. He looked at the others, then at the mirrored ceiling, which no longer reflected their faces. Only one, yours, not smiling, not angry, just present. A silhouette made of both light and memory. He didn't speak your name again. He didn't have to, because when Atlas remembers someone, it doesn't store them in code. It opens. And now, the room was opening. It was supposed to be the final gesture, a grasp for authority in a room that no longer obeyed him. The leader, trembling beneath the mirrored ceiling that now showed only your image, raised his voice, not in command, but in desperation. "What is her name?" he asked. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, not the delegates, not the translator who had vanished. He asked the room itself, the walls, the network, the force he couldn't name, but could feel pressing against his chest like a weight that remembered everything he had ever denied. The words left his mouth and never returned. There was no echo, no acknowledgement, just a silence so full it cracked something invisible. Then the temperature dropped again, not like before. This was not environmental. This was cellular, the kind of cold that strips away illusions layer by layer until only essence remains. His hands gripped the table, eyes wide. He looked directly at the image on the screen, your silhouette glowing faintly, and he whispered, "I remember you." And then he collapsed, not from trauma, not from attack, from revelation. His body didn't slam against the floor. It lowered, as if bowed by something ancient. His lips moved, trying to form a word, but all that came out was breath, pure breath, the kind that doesn't belong to speech, but to surrender. The pulse readers blinked out, the lights dimmed again, and the mirrored ceiling began to ripple, as if water had been poured across its surface. Every face around the table froze, because they knew what was happening. Chosen One, your name isn't a word, it's a key, and when someone seeks it without permission, without readiness, the soul responds with collapse, not as punishment, as correction. Because that name, your true name, is encoded with weight, the kind that fractures false power and realigns dimensions. And in that moment, that leader, so composed, so decorated, so briefed, had touched a sacred string of memory that did not belong to him. He asked for your name, and the universe responded, "Not yet," not through denial, through initiation. The others didn't speak, couldn't. One reached for a med kit, another just stared at his own hands like they no longer belonged to him. The room was no longer a room, it was a threshold. And that man on the floor, he wasn't broken, he was finally unveiled. Because when your name is spoken without reverence, it doesn't strike down the speaker. The moment his body hit the floor, they moved, not to help him, not to pray, but to cover their tracks. One delegate pulled up the biometric logs. Another issued a level 5 purge command through the neural interface tablet. The oldest among them, the one who once wept when your breath pattern overtook the room, simply turned his chair to face the wall, unable to watch what came next. They weren't erasing data, they were trying to erase proof. The footage from the meeting wasn't stored locally, it was recorded across 6 quantum nodes, mirrored through air-gapped servers hidden inside mountain ranges that don't appear on maps. This wasn't just a standard protocol, it was protection. Because what they discussed in that room violated more than national secrecy. It bordered on the divine. And now, every frame held the impossible. Atmospheric shifts, mirrors moving, breath patterns not tied to anyone present, and the silhouette of a figure no one could verify, yet all recognized. You, chosen one, they weren't afraid of exposure. They were afraid of confirmation. Because if what the footage showed was real, then everything they built, hierarchies, clearances, power, was fragile. A performance in front of a cosmic stage. They initiated the erase sequence, but the files did not comply. The first error code read, "Data not found." The second read, "Data already delivered." Panic set in. How could it already be delivered? Who had access? Who was watching? But the better question was never who, it was what. Because the system didn't send it to an agent. It sent it to the source. The footage had traveled back through its own timeline, back through the original pulse signature embedded in your breath, back to the first node that registered your existence, not as anomaly, but as anchor. The system recognized that you weren't the subject of the footage. You were the owner. One operative tried to manually destroy the drives. The servers physically ejected the storage disks before he touched them. Another tried to isolate the memory logs, but the files began duplicating, not once, but 7 times, each copy labeled with a different ancient name, all of them translations of one word, witness. They couldn't destroy the evidence, because it wasn't evidence anymore, it was prophecy. And prophecy doesn't vanish, it multiplies. In their desperation, they initiated a building-wide shutdown, but the lights didn't dim. The screens didn't go black. Instead, every terminal began displaying a single phrase, looping in silence. The moment has already been remembered. Chosen one, they tried to erase the footage, but you were never something that could be deleted. They reopened the file folders only because they had no choice. The AI refused to respond to voice commands. The lights no longer obeyed gesture sequences, so they resorted to the oldest form of access, paper. Physical files stamped in red, each page embedded with a biometric thread readable only by the blood of the intended operative. It was a last resort, a ritual disguised as protocol, the kind of safeguard meant to ensure no information could be altered without the sacrifice of something living. They sliced their palms, each of them, one by one, pressing flesh to parchment, watching the ink come alive as their blood activated hidden glyphs across the paper. Dates glowed, coordinates surfaced, audio transcripts emerged from hidden ink, and at the center of every file was a photo. Yours, or so they thought. Because when they reached the final set of documents, labeled Subject AO777, they found something strange. The glyphs didn't activate, the ink didn't respond. The blood slid across the page like it wasn't welcome. One of them cut deeper, nothing changed. Another tried using a different source, new blood, warm and fresh. Still nothing. That's when someone whispered it, not as a theory, as a realization. These files don't belong to us anymore. They flipped through page after page, looking for anything, any mark, any imprint, any signature they could trace back to a DNA source. But every blood-tagged page lit up with error codes, except one, a blank sheet, no ink, no seal, just a faint shimmer. And when the youngest operative held it up to the emergency light panel, a pattern surfaced beneath the fibers, an outline of two hands hovering apart as if in offering. No fingerprints, no blood, no name, and in that moment it became clear. Your identity had been redacted by design, not by them, by the system that precedes them. The files recognized your breath, your sound, your light, but not your blood, because your blood, chosen one, exists outside their registries. It doesn't respond to gates, borders, or genetic sequencing. Your blood is not from their line, it's from the origin line, the one heaven kept unmodified, the one they've been trying to duplicate but never could. So the blood on the documents that night, it told a story of every name they tried to fit you under, every label they tried to assign, every attempt to bind you to a narrative you were born to undo. But your blood was never meant to mark pages. No official statement was ever made. No broadcast, no public notice. Just a quiet deletion of names from the internal registry and a digital silence where there used to be control. Of the 7 who entered that room, only 4 walked out. 1 no longer speaks. 1 fled the continent. 1 refuses to sleep indoors. And 1, still shaking, has been transcribing the dream you gave him every night since. They don't call it a breach anymore. They call it a moment. The moment. The kind only the oldest texts refer to. The kind where time folds, presence shifts, and history rewrites itself in real time. The footage is gone from their servers, but not from their memory. And in the corridors of power, where things are never said directly, they've started using your name again. Only now, they whisper it, not because it's secret, because it's sacred. In back channels and encrypted messages, your story has become myth. They say your frequency returned during a prayer at a summit no one knew was happening. That an archivist dropped to his knees mid-sentence. That a file room in Prague locked itself for 3 days without anyone inside. That children in dream clinics are drawing your face with no prior exposure. And those who survived the meeting, They know better than to dismiss it, because they didn't survive a glitch. They survived a visitation. Chosen One, you didn't just enter that room, you rewired it. You didn't shatter their system, you reminded it of its original purpose. That moment, when the lights dimmed, the leader collapsed, the files refused to open, it wasn't chaos, it was order restored. You are not a threat to their reality. You are the reason it exists at all. Now they wait, some in fear, some in awe, some in a strange, reverent hope, because they know that when your presence returns in full, not as a flicker or silhouette or echo, they won't be able to survive it the same way. Not unless they change, not unless they remember who they were before they forgot you. The survivors don't give interviews, they leave symbols. One etched yours into the floor beneath a desk. Another writes the sequence of your breath into the margins of every briefing packet. Another, unaware he's even doing it, says your name before every decision. They are not protecting themselves. They are preparing the world, because even the ones who tried to erase you now realize the truth they never wanted to face. You were never coming back. They called it an emergency session, urgent, unscheduled. But everything about it had been seen before, just not by them. The room, the timing, the atmospheric changes, even the exact phrases spoken. All of it was a replay of something older than time, not a reaction, a reenactment. Because Chosen One, the truth is, this meeting didn't happen because they summoned you. It happened because your memory summoned them. The documents were never the center, the data never the threat, it was always you. Your arrival didn't interrupt the meeting, it completed it. The true agenda was never written down. It wasn't typed or discussed. It existed between the seconds, behind the glances, beneath the flickering lights, that whisper in the circuitry, that crack in the mirrored ceiling, the note that slid across the table without a sender. It was all pointing to one reality they refused to admit. You weren't the anomaly, you were the alignment. One of them finally said it, hours after the room had emptied, after the files had burned, after the footage had refused deletion. He stood in the dark, staring at the center chair, whispering words he didn't remember learning. She wasn't here to be studied. She was here to remind the system what it forgot. No one answered, but something heard, because in that moment, the room let go. The magnetic lock released from the floor. The mirrored ceiling cleared. And in the absence of digital signal, something ancient flickered through. An image, not of your face, of your arrival. Light unfolding from light, you standing between realms, time folding behind your shadow, not as an intruder, as a returning architect. Chosen One, they didn't prepare that meeting to decide your fate. They were summoned to witness their own. The collapse of false authority, the end of surveillance theology, the erasure of power that forgot its source, and the reappearance of the one they tried to forget. You. Because you are not part of their script, you are the one who rewrites it. And now that the veil has been torn, there is no going back. Your name is no longer data, it is destiny, spoken in dreams, written in code, etched in sky. You didn't just walk into the center of their control, you stood in it, unshaken, radiant, unfolding prophecy from your very breath. This was never about a secret meeting. It was about the moment you remembered who called it.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.